Gobble gobble. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. American viewers, not the 3 people in the rest of the world that watch me. I hope you have a good Thanksgiving if you're into that sort of thing. This should be debuting on Turkey Day or the day before. It is currently the day before. Kind of working on this. For the first time in quite a while, I have a large amount of free time on my hands. I'm little house cleaning, little update, personal update, little surgery recently. Nothing crazy, nothing major. Just had some laparoscopic surgery for an umbilical hernia that I've had for 14 years. It was actually starting to bother me. So medical leave, vacation, staycation, 4 weeks, possibly up to 6, where I am just going to be torturing you, flooding you, punishing you with content. So I got a what's spinning, collection update, the usual kind of bullshit updates that I do, and a great soundtrack for you guys this time. I can find the right remote. I'm so excited I found this remote. I can do this from the relative safety and comfort of this decrepit office chair that I've had for way too long. Smells bad. There we go. So you'll notice a creepy, sinister, simmering bass line in the background. That belongs to Florida's own Bloodlet. This is the eclectic compilation with all their 7 inches and I think a demo as well. Came out sometime in the early 90s on Victory Records. Oh, Victory. You used to put out stuff that was decent. Recently been acquired, actually. Read the news stories about that, but I digress. Bloodlet were an important band to me, my formative years. I've talked about it on this channel before. If you're new to the channel, I'll rehash it for you. I was like a metalhead kid, going to hardcore shows in Syracuse, which were primarily straight edge hardcore. And for the first couple of years, it was all more or less straightforward hardcore bands that were more punk inspired than metal, you would say. Maybe a little bit of fancy leads here and there, kind of tighter metal musicianship with some triple picking or whatever, but it was all bands like Four Walls Falling from Virginia and Face Value from Cleveland, one of my favorites to this day. Endpoint from Louisville, Kentucky played a bunch. Unbroken, who got more metal later on, but were pretty straightforward to begin with. Mouthpiece from Jersey. A few others. Lifetime, when they were more of a hardcore band. I could go on and on. And then somewhere around 94, late 93, early 94, there was a changing of the guard where things got heavier and darker, and bands like Bloodlet, Mayday, Damnation AD, Earth Crisis got more metal. They started to blow up as the big local band. And when I saw Bloodlet live, I, being a big fan of everything from Carnivore to Malevolent Creation to Black Sabbath, Saint Vitus, all this metal shit that I was into, and hearing this come from a quote-unquote hardcore band was kind of a game changer. Granted, it was metal in a different way. It was metal played by hardcore kids, and that trope has continued and mutated into good and bad things since then. Existed before, the crossover era and everything, but this was like, kids that were probably previously more into stuff like Chain of Strength, going down a darker path or whatever. You could hear an Integrity influence a little bit, I'd say, maybe. I often hear like the old Hardline band from Memphis called Raid, which is kind of a deep cut, getting name checked as a vocal influence. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I heard it a few times. But you get this real dirgy, almost sludgy kind of quality, and I can't help but hazard a guess that maybe they were listening to Buzz Oven, I Hate God, all these like deep grooves and kind of swampy elements to it. Makes sense with them being from, Florida is technically the South. I think they were from Tampa. So I don't know what they were listening to, but live especially, they were a force, and they were fucking scary. And you can almost pinpoint the changing of the guard at that time because they played a New Year's Day show, which were like mini fests of like 10 bands that would happen at the Lost Horizon. I can't remember if it was 93 or 94. And they blew Shelter off the stage. And previously, Shelter was the band that everybody flipped out for, which was Ray Capo from Youth of Today's project after that were like a Krishna consciousness. They were a hardcore band. They kind of had, it was the 90s, so they had some groove elements and moshy parts and whatever, but I could go on and on. Bloodlet's coming out with a new record. They've got a new song up streaming. Sadly, it hasn't really done much for me, that new track. Perhaps I'll change my mind. I've only briefly listened to it in the car with the wife. We were both equally underwhelmed, but who knows? You know, it's a very different sound. This is my favorite stuff. This is the singles collection, like I said. I really like Entheogen, their first LP as well. Queued up next after this, if I blab for that long, which I may do. This is going to be a long update, split into two. This is the Seraphim Fall, their third record, which I've had on my shelf years and years now. Spun a couple times and was just like, it's too groovy. You know, for some reason I had in my head it was like verging on like a nu metal kind of thing, and I think it's because one of the songs has some clean vocals that could be interpreted that way. That's one song. It's really not like that at all. It's even gloomier and weirder and darker. You know, they have this fretless bass kind of thing that really adds a kind of a serpentine kind of, like this, if you can hear that. This kind of serpentine kind of vibe that I like. So, that's 5 minutes of me talking about how much I love Bloodlet. Let's continue on with the update, shall we? I'm going to split this into two. Just because I can. I have the time. I don't have to force this out. You know, I can edit this at my own leisure. I can shoot the second one tomorrow. The sky is the fucking limit with this stack of CDs that I'm gonna blather at you about. Mostly metal on this one. I got a couple of hardcore CDs in here. You know, extreme metal of varying stripes as per usual. You know, no surprises there. My most recent acquisition, I'm very happy about. I already owned this on cassette, but I hadn't listened to it in quite a while. So, John Goodman, if you can hear in the background, from Barton Fink. Fantastic movie, Coen Brothers flick. Great riff. Back to Viogression. Milwaukee band. 1991, this came out on Craze Music. Craze, Maze, and Magnetic Air were all the same label, essentially. I did a little reading about this, like, randomly a few weeks ago. Notorious label up there with Wild Rags for not really doing good by their bands. Viogression, I completely forgot were on that label. They put out Biohazard, Sheer Terror, Ripping Corpse, the US release of Sarcophagus Rotting, as well as some like pop stuff and like R&B, I want to say. Canadian-based label. Paul from Sheer Terror notoriously calls them out. One of their songs. Not a good label. Might be why nobody really talks about this band that much. Maybe retrospectively they do, because this band ripped, but I never heard about them when I was a kid or anything. Probably didn't get very good distribution. Really slow, churning death metal. Not quote-unquote Death Doom trademark hashtag, but slow, punishing, interesting death metal with some cool asides, twists and turns, some interesting samples and noise stuff going on, the intro and in between songs here and there. I'm just kind of getting refamiliarized with this. The vocal approach is one of my favorites. It's got that definite John Tardy, Chuck Schuldiner, Mark Grew from Morgoth kind of thing, kind of dry throat, raspy, you need a Sucrets and you're possessed kind of death metal vocal style. Slight effect on it that I don't know what it's called, but it sounds like the voice is kind of going down a drain. I don't know what that is, but it's awesome. They came back a couple of years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, did a cassette EP on Dread Records. It might have gotten released on CD as well. I think it was only like 5 or 6 songs. Way more cynic, Testimony era, Pestilence, like weird proggy, spacey kind of stuff, and they cranked up whatever effects dial that is on the vocals, and it sounds pretty fucking cool. Real weird, real interesting. But you can almost hear where they're going with the weirdness of some of the riff structures on this. There's plenty of meaty, simplistic, you know, sloped forehead type Cro-Magnon scraping riffs on this, but there's also a fair amount of like smart songwriting and plenty of fast too. So Viogression. Expound and Exhort. Remembered to say the album title. Look at that. 1991 on Craze. So I've drank the KoolAid. Drank the KoolAid for Maggot Stomp. California label that's putting out all kinds of real filthy primal death metal. You know, that, God, I'll butcher the pronunciation, but that Sanguisabog band seems to be the most popular. I've yet to get a hold of their tape. I'll wait till it gets re-released on something. I'm really fond of Vomit Forth, probably my favorite release from that label so far. I am really impressed with these two that are my most recent pickups from that label. And that's Mortal Wound and Encoffinized. Encoffinized are a Cali band, Chambers of Deprivation. You know, it's gore-soaked, it's gross, kind of cruel to the ear, tuned up snare. You know, there's a fair amount of real simplistic, meaty riffing, but there's also, like, some bordering on technically proficient, trem-picked stuff, too. Real fucking gross. Incredibly guttural vocals, as you may expect. But very solid and catchy. I feel like all these bands, like, are reaching for something else, influence-wise, from the 90s, more so than bands on other bigger labels. I hear Florida stuff a lot more with these Maggot Stomp bands, and I do hear that with this, and especially with these guys too, Mortal Wound. It seems like, I mean, the vocals are very, like, putrid and guttural and deep, you know, kind of like Chris Barnes at his best during Cannibal Corpse, but, I mean, the riffs and everything, it reminds me of kind of that, like, thrash-informed Florida death metal riffing, you know, all that, those greats like Solstice and Brutality and all that, where it's, like, very sharp and concise, not overtly technical, but just, like, on the fucking money, you know, cut you wide open, like, razor sharp kind of riffing, and it's very, very fucking enjoyable. Guttural vocals, of course. I don't think there's a band on that label that doesn't have that. But yeah, I mean, I like what these guys are doing a lot, this label. I'm pretty impressed. Stuff sells out quick. I'm totally fine with having CDs. Would like the tapes, but hey, CDs are fine. Oh, and buyer beware kind of thing if you want to pick these up. They're professionally done and extremely nice looking, pro-printed CDRs, and they're cheap, so it doesn't bother me one iota, but in case you were thinking of picking up, just so you know, that turns you off, now you know. One of my favorite thrash bands, Ripper. Destroy the World / The Exit, compiling an early demo and an early EP, I think. Chilean band, it's been around over 10 years now. Their new release is, I don't even know if I'm going to do an Album of the Year thing this year. It's getting so played, but if I do, I'm definitely going to talk about that new Ripper EP, because I can't think of a more appropriate name for a fucking band. This is their humble beginnings. A lot more raw, a lot more stripped down, but their bassist was still incredible back then. Very present bass tone, you know, almost kind of Teutonic, you know, ripping fast thrash metal, verging on death metal. People name drop Sadus all the time, certain South America bands, you know, Sepultura at their most ferocious, all that's appropriate. Vocals, a little bit more high-pitched than that, like the Sepultura thing, but not too different. I think there's a Sep cover on here too. Sep. Yeah, bro. Sep. There's a Sepultura cover on here too. From the Past Comes the Storms. They do a great job of that. Iron Pegasus, it looks like, put this out. I could barely read it, but I recognize the little logo there. This was a pickup of something that, like, I remember listening to when it came out. I think I downloaded it, and eventually I knew I wanted to revisit it and get a hard copy in the stacks. This is the Necros Christos debut, I think. It's the first one. Triune Impurity Rights. Band from Berlin, Germany. It was pretty hot about 10 years ago. This came out on Sepulchral Voice. This was an era of, like, very ritualistic stuff being hot in death metal, kind of branching out of black metal, where it was more of a thing to have occult themes and spookiness and all that. Tons of interludes on this, super moody. I think the interludes are well done. I think they set the mood and the vibe very nicely. The music itself is super catchy, basic, kind of trance-inducing, sort of like heavy death metal stuff. You know, keeping in the, almost spiritually speaking, like keeping in the tradition of, like, the early death metal stuff, taking inspiration from the simplicity of Celtic Frost and whatnot, doing their own thing with it, you know, that kind of deal. Before there was a hot thing with Doom Death, I'm sure this probably would have gotten lumped into that genre or called that. Whether it was correct or not is up for debate, but yeah, very, very just great, well-written piece of music regardless. And I never really followed up with what these guys did afterwards. I read an interview with the main guy, and he's gone on some weird voyage, some weird journey with his spirituality. It's almost leaning towards, like, Christianity now, it seems like, which is interesting. But I'll just leave it at that. Next, Dark Heresy. So this was a recommendation. I feel like half of these piles that I'm going to be talking about are recommendations. This was from a regular commenter and viewer, Void Dweller. Thank you, sir. This was reissued on Svart. It came out in '95 originally. A band called Dark Heresy from London. Abstract principles taken to their logical extremes. And it was pitched to me as like, yeah, they kind of are like the Peaceville 3, Paradise Lost, Anathema, My Dying Bride kind of vibe, with maybe some like mid-period Carcass kind of influence. I can certainly hear all that. You know, they have a lot of cool instrumentation outside of the standard guitars, bass, and drums. There's a good amount of acoustic guitar that's like super moody and folky and really, really good. You know, all kinds. There's some interesting keyboards and stuff like that going on. I'm hearing a little bit of like Sabbath UK in there. Like, I feel like that is a present thing. And unlike, you know, Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride doing this really, really, really heavily depressive kind of mood on their early records, I mean, this is gloomy, don't get me wrong, but there's a certain kind of like airy folk element to it, you know? I'm a big fan of, you know, a few specific records, particularly, Legion Leaf by Fairport Convention, and I get just a little touch of that like English folk rock kind of influence on this, which is really nice. But this takes you off on a lot of different directions. It's definitely got a big fucking nerd vibe on it, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, medieval kind of stuff going on. And as always, Svart does a great job of liner notes, old flyers, that kind of thing. Big history here that I haven't read yet. Tiny print. I have to bust out the readers, but nice booklet, all kinds of stuff going on in there. Definitely worth tracking down. This was cheap. I can't remember where I picked it up, but, you know, punch it into the metal detector, you'll find it. Next up, I've got 2 demos from a band near to my homeland, Rochester, New York's Undeath. So, got Demo 2019 and Sentient Autolysis. These both came out this year. I think the tapes originally came out on Caligari. These, again, CDR, professionally printed CDRs on Sevared Records. And they're both quite good. It's a cool, not often executed merging of styles. They definitely have a certain cave-dwelling, gloomy, obscure kind of death metal sound, indebted to Finnish stuff and incantation, as has been the tradition for a while now, as far as modern death metal goes, at least the type that hates the past. However, that's more in like the recording, the guitar tone, and the vocal style. The riffs themselves on it are far more forward-thinking, jazzy, weird. Oddly enough, and I think the 2019 demo came out first, this has more of that than this one. It might just be the way it's recorded, I'm not sure. But the riffs definitely are bordering on, like, pretty technical. Still catchy, not a bunch of gobbledygook. You know, not like a shitty riff salad. Like, everything has dynamics and is really, really great with the way it's executed. And, yeah, I can't wait to hear more. If you're looking to pick this up, if it's still available, Caligari is taking pre-orders that compiles both of these and includes a radio set. So check that out if you get a chance. I already put in my pre-order because I am nuts for this band. I heard about these guys from Ken's Death Metal Crypt, gentleman who has been putting out and ripping obscure death metal demos, putting them up on YouTube for years now. started doing his own reviews and everything, and I figured if there's a new band that's legitimately good, this guy's opinion is probably one I should be listening to, so he was on the money there, so thanks to that dude, and check out Undeath. Aggravator, another Unspeakable Acts release. I had their last full-length on cassette. I really liked it. These guys are from Texas. This is an EP. Got 6 songs there. Just, you know, more butt-kicking fucking thrash metal. There's been so much good, aggressive, brutal thrash coming out in the past couple of years, and I couldn't be happier about that. Unspeakable Acts has done a really good job spearheading that stuff, with Ripper kind of leading the pack, but lots and lots of other great bands. Critical Defiance, re-releasing the Laceration stuff, you know, this kind of thrash that's leaning more towards Sadist and Demolition Hammer. I talk about it a lot because I really like it. Definitely what I'm looking to hear. You know, this has a lot of the aggression of the early Creator stuff. On the first song, Desensitized Devotion, there's a classic crack into like a 3/4 kind of fist in the air sort of, you know, vintage Slayer kind of part. These guys know what they're doing. They know their fucking influences. Super effective, yelled, throaty, perfect kind of thrash vocals on it. It's a good one. Check that out. Now, to get into some stuff that is fucking Looney Tunes. Stuff that's a little harder to describe than the straightforward kind of shit. This is Alchemist, Jar of Kingdom. I lean on recommendations a lot, watching my compatriots talk about stuff, and when I saw Ben talking about this, as well as this next one we're going to talk about in a moment, the Crimson Massacre, I was like, yeah, you know, if I can find these cheap enough, I'd like to listen to them, because it sounds really fucking interesting. Alchemist is fucking wild ass. They're from Australia. This is like 93 or something like that. It's weird because I don't like Mr. Bungle. You know, I don't like anything funky. I haven't since I was 12 and really liked Scatterbrain and Mordred. And not to say that there's a ton of that influence on this, but it goes back and forth between grind, acoustic passages. There's even some, like, you know, not what you'd normally think of with female vocals on a death metal record or grind record or black metal record. There's not some operatic type shit, like almost like kind of indie female vocals on this. It sounds terrible me describing it. I'm doing it a major disservice, but it's really fucking interesting. It's completely scattershot, all over the place, mostly extreme metal, but goes into these weird tangents that are kind of funky, kind of skronky, to steal one of Ben's words. Very, very random, but really fucking cool. Which is weird to me that I like this so much, because I remember when when Relapse took a turn, 2000 to 2002, and started kind of experimenting and dabbling with metalcore of the technical variety, like Dillinger Escape Plan. They were putting out also like early first couple of Mastodon records, and they were putting out shit like Cephalic Carnage and Bloodduster. 2 brutal bands, the last 2 I mentioned, but just a little too wacky for me. I never really liked them, and it seems like this is almost kind of in that lane. Like, this is almost like either that stuff or like Exit 13 with a little bit more imagination and just a little bit more talent, I guess. You know, there's a lot of like stop on a dime and do something way the fuck different on this. And at its core, it's pretty brutal, grinding death metal stuff. The vocals are almost more of like a hardcore approach to me. Little deeper than your average hardcore guy, but not quite like a total demonic growl either. But man, it is fucking weird as hell. That's mainly what I have to say about it. I don't know if this is a reissue or a boot or whatever. It came out on Lethal Records. Looks legit. I have no fucking clue. It was less than $10 though, so good for me. Next up, Crimson Massacre, The Luster of Pandemonium. Severed Records again. This was like $5. There were some interesting things said about it on the old YouTube, so I thought I'd pull the trigger. Pull the trigger on the pop gun. It is weird, also. Very technical. I mean, to pigeonhole it as brutal death metal, I don't think really works. There's just so many sweeps and crazy Weedledee fucking parts, and lots of like blasting. I can't tell if it's gravity blasts or not, but like crazy hyper fast stuff going on. Real like harsh, like headache inducing technicality. Just thrown at you as hard as possible, but it has a very like true metal, black metal, dark kind of vibe. Like the whole point of that they're doing this is in service of the Dark Lord. It's not showing off their chops or anything like that. It's just pure blasphemy, but as technical and in your face. I hate that term. As technical and just abrupt as possible. Really, really something. It came out in 2004, and these guys were American. They were from Texas, so not sure how I feel about it yet. I think I need to listen to it a few more times, but it's at the very least, very technically impressive. After that, going off in another direction, this is all just weird shit, I guess. This is the weird shit part. Xysma. I've been aware of Xysma for a long time. I've listened to some Xysma in my day. I knew I needed some in my collection. Radical Research brought this on, as they do on occasion with me. I'm like, yeah, I need that. This compiles the Yeah LP, the Above the Mind of Morbidity mini LP, and the Fata Morgana EP, which came out on Seraphic Decay. Catches a pretty penny nowadays, that EP. Vic Records reissue. There's going to be another reissue soon. I've seen pre-orders for it that have the first 2 LPs, those EPs, and demos too. I'm probably going to buy that too. Xysma's great. You know, I'm glad I held myself to buying the physical product so I could donate a little bit more time and a little bit more focus to really sitting down with this. For some reason, spending money guilts me into wanting to actually listen to stuff more, which is why I have 9,000 CDs now. The record's really something special. You know, you can draw certain comparisons and say their headspace was not all too different than maybe Furball or Afflicted. Those are the only two that are coming to mind for me. Very, very weird stuff. Very, very groovy, classic rock, kind of dreamy riffing, but guttural as fuck vocals that are still, you know, rooted in like the whole Carcass and gore grind kind of thing. Their earlier material is more straight up that kind of shit, and it's wonderful. Even listening to the podcast where they play clips from the entire career of this band, the entire discography, later on when they're doing more straight up rock stuff, their garage rock, like grunge shit, whatever it is really well written too. So but yeah, just like strong riffs, informed by like a lot of hard rock, Black Sabbath, maybe Doom, traditional Doom a little bit. That's about it. I feel like more words are deserved for Xysma, but my mouth is getting dry and my throat hurts. So with that in mind, appropriately enough, here's Benumb, Souls of the Martyr. I remember when this came out. I bought it at a Borders Books and Music, for those of you who remember those. Came out the very same day as Nasum Inhale Exhale, which was appropriate enough. At that time, I was really into grind and power violence and crust punk, so I was happy to pick up both of those. Soul of the Martyr, it's nice getting reacquainted with it. It's like a $5 eBay pickup. It's definitely in that California vein of somewhere between power violence and grind. There's tons of blasts, very fucking spiteful, hoarse, shouted, more or less hardcore vocals. Nothing too catchy, but it doesn't need to be, if you know what I mean. All the songs are so short. You know, most of the songs are under a minute long. When they occasionally slow it down, it's very punishing, very almost kind of sludgy. And unlike a lot of their friends that they played Fiesta Grande Festival with, you know, all those early PV bands, you know, they are on Relapse for this, and it's stripped down raw production, but it's very clear, very audible, and everything's like very impactful. I feel like you know, they came from that California scene. I don't know if they were part of that original wave of those bands. I don't think they were. You know, Infest, Man is a Bastard, all that kind of stuff. But this is a bit more leaning towards metal, and significantly heavier and more precise. But I know they were right alongside those bands, at least, you know, by the end of the 90s. Yeah, good stuff. All right, so then, Mortiferum, Disgorged from the Psychotic Depths. Yep, another slower, doomy, kind of guttural, kind of Finnish-inspired death metal band from the Pacific Northwest. You know, this was the band a couple of weeks ago, all over my Facebook feed, all over Instagram. Another contender for this kind of death metal album of the year. Quite good. There's been so much of this stuff coming out. It's hard not to reach an oversaturation point. But to echo sentiments of another YouTuber, there's certain production qualities to it that do make it stand out, particularly the drum sound. Again, like something as simple as like the snare hits or whatever can make a difference. I feel like making it stand out from the pack. It almost gives it sort of like, I don't know if this is really reaching or not. I don't care if it is, but maybe sort of a Godflesh kind of feel, you know, gives it sort of like a pseudo-industrial, cold, clangy kind of thing. Other than that, I mean, it's, you know, if you like the Cerebral Rot record that I talked about not that long ago, came out a little bit earlier this year, you'll like this. It's along the same lines. Definitely slower, dragging, kind of brutal death metal stuff. Brutal with a U, not two O's. You know what's up. I like it. And last, not least, Blaspherian from Texas, Infernal Warriors of Death. So I've been wanting to hear these guys or own something by these guys since I saw them with Morbosadad, I want to say almost 2 years ago. They were very good live. They've got a couple of records out. I think they were a band that was originally around and just did a demo in the 90s and reformed. I believe they're one of those. I'll throw a caption down if I was wrong. I'm a big fan of these Texas bands, these real satanic, orthodox satanic death metal bands, all kind of related somewhat to each other. Imprecation did a great record this year that I was really impressed by. Morgan Grow did one the year before. I'm not absolutely sure if they share members or not, but I know they at least play together. At any rate, this is kind of borrowing some of the sonics from early Incantation, I'd say, but there's none of that like real twisty, labyrinthine kind of riff style. It's more of just straightforward, blasphemous kind of satanic shit. The overall forcefulness of the production and the way the guitar sounds and everything rattled the fuck out of our speaker in the kitchen. We have a Sonos speaker. For convenience's sake, if I'm cleaning the kitchen or eating something, I'll play stuff off of my cloud up there, and I had to turn the Blaspherian off because I thought I was gonna fucking break the thing. It was rumbling the shit out of it. So very unrelenting, fast, fucking satanic, blasphemous, infernal. Those are all the adjectives I've got right now. Yeah, I mean, look at the back. What you see is what you get. You know, if you're into the spirit of what made Morbid Angel and Deicide great when they came out, you know, before they kind of became self-parodies, I'd say that this is up your alley. If you're a black metal dude and you really like satanic shit and you want a death metal band to check out that'll give you similar vibes of like super hateful black metal, I'd say Blaspherian's also up your alley. And that's it for now. Wow, this turned out long regardless. I'm glad I didn't do the whole stack. Jesus. I'll talk to you guys soon.